So initially when I conceived this channel, I didn't want to do single reviews. I didn't want to dedicate one video to reviewing just one movie. There's already way too many channels out there with that format, and not that that's a bad thing, I just kind of want to make a style of my own. The main reason I don't want to do that is just because all the effort it takes to, record myself reviewing one movie. I have to write it and film it and then edit it, and it's easier for me to just write it and then publish it on Letterboxd if it's just one movie. That's why my videos are typically focused on a director or a film movement where I can bunch a whole movies together and talk about them all in one concise video. That way I can cover more ground and it's worth all the work. However, I realize that there's probably some movies that will not show up on my channel, at least not for a while. Maybe it's a director I'll never get to in years and years from now. Maybe it's a director who didn't direct that many movies. Maybe it's a film that doesn't fit into any category and is in a class all its own. Therefore, I figured, why the hell not? Once in a while, I'm gonna do one of these. I'll dedicate a video to one movie, just to get it out there, just to recommend it to you guys, just so I can talk about it. I don't know how often I'll do these, but I have a few in mind. So yeah, welcome to the first Kino Singles Reviews. Speaking of directors that didn't direct very many movies, we have our first entry in this, which I'm proud to say is The Night of the Hunter. I recently rewatched this film, and it holds up spectacularly. But, obligatory background that pretty much everyone discusses whenever they bring up this movie. Charles Laughton was a very renowned actor of classic Hollywood, appearing in such films as Mutiny on the Bounty, Witness for the Prosecution, Hobson's Choice. In 1955, he decided to pursue directing and entered onto the scene with a startling noir thriller. Unfortunately, The Night of the Hunter was a massive failure upon release, critically and commercially. This is back when people actually listen to critics, when it's a good movie. Go figure. The poor reception upset Laughton so badly that he never directed another movie again, which in retrospect is a huge misfortune to the film world. When it comes to films that were critically panned upon initial release but were reevaluated years later, I can usually understand where the criticism came from. In the case of Night of the Hunter, though, I don't know what critics were on, but it was before the 60s, so it couldn't have been anything good. The Night of the Hunter is a masterpiece in bleak cinema, and is now considered one of the greatest movies ever made. Perhaps viewers didn't like how dark this film was. If there's any word that best describes The Night of the Hunter, it's dark, both tonally and visually. The film contains some of the most impeccable black and white cinematography you'll ever see, the kind that lends itself to the advantage of grim noir stories. Shadows completely take over the frame and command the characters' circumstances, rather than reflect them. It was inspired by a lot of the bold and grotesque shadows you'd see in a German expressionist film, which, to be fair, a lot of noir was influenced by German Expressionism, but I feel like The Night of the Hunter really grasps that, really encapsulates that the best. One of my favorite shots involves correspondence with the architecture and the shadows. The camera pulls back, revealing a dark, empty room, echoing the barren helplessness of our character. There's a famous underwater shot in the film, which is inexplicably beautiful and haunting in a ghostly way. The film stars two of my favorite actors of all time, Robert Mitchum and Lillian Gish. Mitchum stars in what could have been a career killer as one of the most evil characters ever put to screen. The more you watch him, the more terrifying he becomes, the less human he becomes, the more apparent it is just the lack of soul he has. Lillian Gish is one of the most important actresses of all time. A veteran of silent films, her acting style was inventive for the time. Back when actors were still employing grand gestures, Gish was reserved and subtle, really pioneering the style of acting that would come to motion pictures exclusively from the theater. When I first watched this film, I was very excited to see her in this role, and I absolutely love her character. Gish plays a firm matriarch, but she's easily the warmest and most sensible character in this harrowing tale. As mentioned, the film is about a rogue preacher named Harry Powell, who finds out from his cellmate that he has some money hidden somewhere, and only his children know about it. The preacher inserts himself into this ruptured family, terrorizing the children, determined to get that money by any means necessary. The film is mostly from the perspective of these two children, which really emphasizes the gritty horror on screen, one that knows no age, no gender, a truly cruel world. The children inherently add a sense of innocence, but also clarity. They see the world for how it is, and are the only ones who are apprehensive of Preacher Powell. It's almost frustrating in the way that no adult seems to share their fear. Do you remember a series of unfortunate events, the books, the movies, whatever, where the adults were the most frustratingly, annoyingly stupid people on the planet? And you wish just once, just one of them, would listen to the Baudelaire children, because they were right every time. It was always Count Olaf. Yeah, this movie has a similar dynamic with its children. The preacher eventually marries their widowed mother, played by Shelley Winters, and breaks her down, making her ashamed and sinful. It's very disturbing and tragic to see him take advantage of this lonely woman, turning her into a religious slave, making her hate her own body and passions. Audiences at the time were not just watching a destroyer of the body, but a destroyer of the spirit. Powell was a psychological villain, which viewers were not used to. And this is what makes him such a notorious villain, is the multiple levels of evil that he exists on. Something else shocking at the time was the questionable portrayal of religion and religious figures, which audiences at the time were certainly not used to. Perhaps the film got away with it by claiming that Powell wasn't really a preacher. However, even if that is the case, there's never a scene where Powell isn't presenting himself as a man of God. Therefore, I think he firmly believes he is one. Despite its heavy resentment, the film then introduces us to Lillian Gish's character, who's positively portrayed as a devout Christian. It might appear that the film is cushioning its criticism with this inclusion, as to not offend contemporary audiences, but I rather like this angle. So many films that attack religion often portray it in a solely negative way. Not that I don't understand why they do, but The Night of the Hunter shows a flip side to piety, with a good Christian and a bad Christian, a true believer and a faker. That religion on its own will not make you a good person, and that many sickly men will abuse religion to justify their intentions and become the most egregious of demons. Subsequently, the brother and sister run away from home and live life on a small rowboat on the river. You get a short yet clear look at the Depression era, especially what it was like to be an orphan, wandering from house to house looking for scraps. Here is where they come to the house of Miss Cooper, and we finally get to see Lillian Gish. Cooper is a tough old woman, yet has a pure heart, caring for a lot of stray children in her residency. She teaches the children how to garden, she cooks for them, reads the Bible to them, but she'll take a shotgun to the first crooked creep who comes by and threatens her family. Miss Cooper is the only adult suspicious of Preacher Powell, and doesn't tolerate his shifty tricks for a second. The film finally does become a standoff between good and evil, love and hate. This concept is best imagined in one of the most enduring sights of cinema, depicting Preacher Powell with the words love and hate tattooed on the knuckles of his two hands. This has been replicated so many times in pop culture and in real life too. You're probably familiar with this idea, with this popular tattoo that people will get, and yes, it came from this movie, so there you go. What really drives home the uneasy cynicism of this film is the ending. Don't worry, this is spoiler-free, but it's not exactly a satisfying ending, where we see the villain take this great plunge to his death. While the preacher sort of gets his comeuppance, the audience doesn't exactly see him get what he deserves. At least it's not done in a conventional way like a Disney movie, where we see the villain have this fall and defeat. Following this, we get some commentary on mob mentality and human nature, which prevents the film from wrapping up in a nice little bow. As if saying, even though the events of the film are over, evil still persists. Again, the finale is way ahead of its time, and despite the fact that films have gone more cynical since then, you gotta give credit to this trailblazer. The message seems to be that there are good and bad things in the world. The film never dampens its harshness it depicts by saying, but there's good things, in a cliche path a lot of films will take. Taking the easy way out, erasing all the evil that's been done. More like it's saying, there is bad, but there is good. The good may not triumph over the bad, yet there is still good. It really does feel like an unadulterated, neutral depiction of the world. And that's what makes The Night of the Hunter such a daring film. Who knows, Charles Laughton could have been another Orson Welles if he was only appreciated at this time. He had such a vision, and he could have made so many more classics if given the opportunity. He actually did try developing another project at one point, with Robert Mitchum on board as well. However, because The Night of the Hunter was initially a failure, the studios rejected him. The Night of the Hunter is a bold and cold thriller, never afraid to go as dark as it needs to. It's a dismal portrayal of America through the Great Depression and just how desperate people were for any kind of salvation. It is pure noir in just the way it dissects the absolute worst of human nature, both human society and, of course, our internal flaws. Films such as No Country for Old Men, which are so much more bleaker and darker, probably would not exist without the influence of this film. A chilling lead performance, stark visuals, and one of the most menacing urban legends to grace the screen of Americana theaters. Dark, cynical, and spine-tingling. I recommend The Night of the Hunter as my first single review. And there we go, I got my first one done. I hope you enjoyed The Night of the Hunter. Please check it out, it is an incredible film. If you want to see me go in-depth into more movies outside of this channel, you'll have to follow me on Letterboxd. I review movies on there frequently, and more in-depth, more often than I will on here. I am working hard on my next director retrospective, so please look forward to that. It is going to be an interesting and divisive one. As always, guys, keep the art of cinema alive, and happy viewing.